Oh, of course it's recording. Hello. Welcome to another video by Flash Jazz Cat. And this isn't just any video by Flash Jazz Cat. No. This is the release of the new SIDE3 loader beta version. So join me as I take you on a tour of its incredible capabilities. You're going to see things that you never thought possible. It's going to change the way you use your Atari computer. So prepare. Get ready for what is to come. And yes, it's time, after all these months and months of work, to finally introduce to you, the viewer and the user, the latest iteration of the SIDE3 loader for the SIDE3 cartridge. And I thought it would be fun in this video and fitting and a change, instead of using the LCD display that I've normally got mounted on the wall here, to use a vintage CRT display. And it took me quite a long time to figure out how to film that, and that's quite an interesting little diversion in itself. I might make a little short video about how I managed to figure that out, because I'm using Logitech Brio cameras here, and it was quite the job to get the thing to record. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, so I want to give it a spin anyway. So I've got my SIDE3 cartridge here. I've got a 64GB SD card, and I'll put the cartridge into the 600XL. Now this 600XL, it does have an ultimate 1MB in it, but we can completely disregard that. The only thing that's activated on the ultimate is the extra RAM. At the beginning of the video, we're going to demonstrate standalone operations. So the computer might have 64KB of RAM. The loader does not require, at no point does it use extended memory at all. So as long as you've got 64K, that's worth pointing out. You do need 48K, in fact, for the loader to work, but it doesn't depend on extended memory. You don't have to have ultimate 1MB. Of course, ultimate 1MB does allow you to do extra things, but there's developments in the pipeline there as well, which I will give passing mention to later in the video. So, got our SIDE3 cartridge in here, essentially a standalone machine. I've actually converted this 600XL temporarily to NTSC for reasons to do with the CRT monitor. Okay, so let's power the machine on. We've got the switch in the upper or loader position at the moment. So as you can see, there's the loader, and it looks very similar, in fact almost identical to what you're probably used to. The difference here is that the status bar across the bottom has changed. That used to have sort of contextual prompts depending on what file you actually had, or folder you actually had highlighted. It would give you some instructions on what to press. That's no longer needed because we've now got a context menu. So that's the first big difference you'll notice here. Quick recap anyway of what SIDE3 can do, because I know some of you are going to come at this video uninitialized, and I should try harder not to assume that people already have familiarity with the hardware. Anyway, SIDE3 provides a SD card based mass storage. It emulates cartridges up to 1MB in size at the moment. It's got built-in Sparta-DOS-X, which is a ROM-based disk operating system for the Atari 8-bit. It's got a 2-position switch here, which if the switch is in the lower position, it boots into Sparta-DOS-X. If it's in the upper position, it boots into this loader here. 2MB of memory, SRAM on the cartridge. It's got 8MB of ROM. Interestingly enough, a future revision of this hardware will actually permit more SRAM. It's got a real-time clock with a battery, so it keeps the date and time. It's also got NVRAM on the RTC chip, so the cartridge can store its settings on the chip rather than having to actually store it on the media. It's got a loader, obviously an XEX loader. You can load executable files, you can mount disk images, you can mount cartridge images, you can browse fat partitions. It's basically a continuation of the prior SIDE hardware. We had the SIDE cartridge and then we had the SIDE2, but this brings cartridge emulation, basically banked cartridge emulation, all different kinds of bank cartridge schemes. Load the images off the SD card on fat partitions. The loader can load the images very quickly into memory. But yeah, it emulates most of the popular bank cartridge formats, and we also have the capability to do in-place FPGA. We can update the code that actually describes the hardware without a programming cable. And with that in mind, I'll just quickly put a request out. If anybody out there would test my flasher, I wrote a CPLD update tool for this that meant you could update the code that's actually on the cartridge that describes the capabilities of the hardware. You could update that without the lattice USB platform cable. Now, if anybody wants to test that flasher, which I wrote about 2 years ago, and I've had no testing feedback from anybody yet, and obviously it's quite mission critical because if it bricks the cartridge, then you do need to resort to the flashing tool. Prior versions of the hardware, you had to have the cable, the platform cable, the Xilinx platform cable as it was then. There was no way to do an in-place software update. I'm not talking about the ROMs here, the loader and that kind of thing. I'm talking about the actual code that describes how the hardware works. This one you can do it, but I wrote the tool. Nobody's tested it yet, and I'm talking about people who have got lattice platform cables. So there's an open request. If anybody wants to test the JED flash tool that I wrote, that needs to be well tested, and nobody's tested it yet. If you want to test it, please get in touch. So if you are familiar with prior versions of the loader on this hardware, if you've bought a SIDE3 previously, you'll be aware of some of the features that are already on offer. We've got 8 menus in the loader here. We've got the device menu, which just shows the media that's actually installed here. So if you pop the card out, it'll tell you that there's no media. If you pop the card back in, it picks up the card and takes you straight to the last accessed FAT partition, which in this case there's only one partition on the card. It's FAT32 partition. I think most people probably have one FAT partition, but this actually supports up to 8 partitions. If we go into the second menu here, which is the partition menu, we can see that this card's got one 60 gigabyte FAT partition. That's minus file system overhead, so that's the size that the file system reports, but the raw capacity of the card is 64 gigabytes. As you know, when you format any kind of hard disk, you lose some space, of course. So if you press return on the partition of interest, that opens the partition. It takes us to the next menu, which is the launch menu, which is symbolized by a little rocket. And in this section we can browse the entire FAT partition. This is of course the root directory. I've got lots of test folders set up here. We can see that the loader uses long file names, and when the long file names don't fit on the screen, they scroll left and right automatically. If it's a kind of file that's handled by the loader, if it's a recognized file type, the 3-character extension always stays put at the right hand side of the screen, so even if the file name is scrolling left and right, you still don't lose track of what you're looking at. In this view we've got the file sizes displayed on the extreme right there. You can turn that off if you wish. If you just go into the options menu here and it says show size, and if we turn that off and then go back to the file list, you can see that the file sizes are gone. I like to have them on. That's my preference anyway. So we'll step through the menus anyway. Here we've got the mounts menu. The mounts menu has been extended obviously with SIDE3. It needs to show the currently mounted cartridge. So when you've mounted a cartridge, it'll show you what kind of cartridge is currently present there, and that will persist until you manually unmount the cartridge. These other slots here are for disk images. There is limited disk image support on the SIDE3 cartridge without any Ultimate 1 megabyte present. Obviously it's much better if you do have Ultimate 1 megabyte, because that's provides a PBI driver for the operating system, allows the operating system to natively communicate with the hard disk, therefore you can boot the system from the hard disk. In this case, standalone, which is what we're talking about at the moment, it uses a soft patched operating system which is loaded into RAM. So any disk image, any software on the disk image which messes around with the port B register, which controls the extended memory, and the shadow RAM and the operating system ROM often clubbers that completely and you lose your RAM-based operating system, so it's not great. But for the odd disk image, it does work perfectly well. You can actually boot DOS 2.5 using that method, and I think it'll even work with the RAM disk, so that's pretty good. So that's the mounts menu. So if we go along to the tools menu, there's just 3 little settings there currently. Now these menus may change in the near future quite drastically as I reorganize things. Remember that this is beta software, so it's going to contain bugs, obviously, even though I've been working on it for a long time. But the reason we're going to get the thing released is so that the user can find the bugs and tell me about them, the ones that I've missed. Anyway, so unmount images, that's to do with disk images, obviously. We've got the swap ATRs, which duplicates the functionality of the little swap button, which doubles as a reset button, and disk refresh simply refreshes the disk, reads the whole partition table again, resets the card, reads the partitions. That's really a carryover from the 1088 XEL loader, which didn't have hardware sensing of card insertion and removal, so I had to add that, and it's never been taken away. Could be useful in some circumstances. So if we move along now to the options menu. Now this menu is getting a bit cluttered now, and that's why I say it's likely that these menus over on the right hand side, they're going to change as we have yet more functionality introduced here, and believe me, there will be. So as well as fixing bugs once this is out, I'll be constantly adding new things to it. There's a laundry list of stuff that I still want to add on top of what I'm going to show you. FAT FMS is actually a DOS, an original DOS that was written from scratch for FAT file systems that is now read-write, and that little DOS, if it's enabled, is loaded before you load an executable file, an XEX file, exe file, that sort of thing. And now you have full read-write access to the FAT partition, FAT16 or FAT32, just as you would through DOS 2.5, Sparta DOS, etc. But of course it's always on the SD card. That in itself should prove quite interesting to see what people can do with that, because you've got read-write access now for the first time on the Atari to 64 gigabytes or even 128 gigabytes of space through the CIO using normal DOS commands. The DOS that I've written, it's a kind of a work-alike of Sparta DOS, especially the disk-based versions of Sparta DOS. You've got XIO commands to make directories, delete directories, change timestamps, all that kind of thing. If we whiz past some of these other options here, we've got the current date and time at the bottom of the screen, which you can edit if you want, and step through them with the cursor keys and change the day. So it's Thursday the 30th of June today, so that's all correct. Clock's a bit fast actually, it looks like it gains a bit of time, so we'll change that to 22:19. And you can do other things here like change the screen color. This is all new. We've now got pop-up lists to change the screen color. So if you wanted a gold screen, you could pick that, for example, and that change is automatically written to the non-volatile RAM on the cartridge, so that color change will persist the next time you start the loader. And we've got 2 pages of options here. We've got ATR support, so at the moment I've got the soft ATR support using that custom operating system that's enabled. We've got lots of new options here. We've got auto run, which I'll go into later on. DOS MEM.SAV. The DOS that I wrote for this cartridge, it has a memory save facility at the moment. I don't know if it's going to be, it's quite space consuming. The whole DOS is about 5K of code. It's very, very compact. That takes space, but I thought it would be worth putting in, so you can say edit a basic XE program, type DOS, go to DOS, do stuff at the command line, and then type run or car rather again, and then be back in your basic XE program as you left it. You can show hidden files. Of course, I've written a manual as well, and technical documentation, programmer's documentation, which you can find on my website. I'll flash that up on the screen so you can have a look at it. And a fella called Steve Owens has very, very kindly, he's a professional technical writer. I'm not a professional technical writer. And we started to talk over email, and he's actually casting his eye over the manual as I go through successive drafts, and very, very good of indeed to share his expertise. So the SIDE3 manual, the new SIDE3 manual for the loader, is going to be really, really good. High standards, very well presented, I think. And I've had to learn a lot of new Microsoft Word techniques and methodologies to present the manual in a way which I think is better than any previous documentation I have produced. So if we go over to the information menu, the info menu, the usual stuff here, SIDE3 loader, we've got the version. It's a beta version, of course, as indicated by the B, so we're not quite at version 1 yet. We will get there eventually. We've got the revision date of the beta, my website. We've got the JED version, so that's what I talked about before, the JED, which is the code which is flashed to the CPLD on the cartridge. I don't know if it's a CPLD or an FPGA. I'm sure Candle will correct me here. Now we've got SRAM size, because that's going to become variable with future versions of the hardware. And likewise we've got hardware revision itself, so the generational revision of the SIDE3 cartridge. This one is a version 3.0, but we will get different ones in the future. And finally we've got the exit menu, which allows you to reboot or boot Sparta-DOS X. The shortcut key for that has changed because Control and S from previous versions, or was it Control and X? I think it was Control X. That's now cut as per Windows shortcuts. Yes, it's cut, copy and paste, of course, X. So that is now Shift, Control and S. These shortcuts are valid throughout the system, so you don't have to be on this menu to actually call this functionality up. Okay, so let's go back to the launcher menu and we'll have a play around in here. So as I say, if you have already used the SIDE3 cartridge, a lot of this will be familiar to you already. To enter a folder, we just go in here like so. We've got the parent folder entry at the top. Underneath there we've got the root folder, so you can always get back to the root directory just by clicking on that second entry. It made more sense to me for the top entry to be the parent folder, and your files will appear down here. You can also press escape to get out of a directory that will actually back you up the tree. And as you see, when you come out of a directory going back up the tree, the entry that you actually were on in the parent folder will be highlighted, and that's true as you progressively go back up and up the tree. Like a kind of a breadcrumbs trail, you'll always go back, and the folder that you actually went into will be highlighted. I don't have to describe that very well, but anyway, there you go. So as before, we can run XEX files, so we'll pick any old XEX file to run. We'll run Zaxxon, I think. Now I launched Zaxxon there and I forgot to turn internal basic off. Well, that's an easy mistake to make. That's off by default, but I had it enabled for some reason, so I've gone back in here. So now if we go back down to Zaxxon, it should run. There we go, there's Zaxxon. Let's go back to the loader. So if I press the button on the top here and then press the system reset key, we should end up back in the loader. So I'll choose another executable here. I'll choose the last word word processor, and I'll make sure we've got our FAT DOS enabled here, and we'll press enter on there and watch the word processor load up. So there we go, so there's the word processor. Now, there's a file system which has been loaded just prior to this application loading up, so we can call the directory. So this is drive 1, so what will happen, we only get one volume on drive 1 supported. So whichever FAT partition you were browsing when you run this executable, so the host FAT partition in which the executable resides, that will be the partition that appears when you query D1, drive 1. So whichever partition you were actually in at the time, any of those 8 supported partitions, that appears as drive 1. So you can't access multiple different FAT partitions yet using this DOS. You get access to the host FAT partition on drive 1. obviously as DOS gets bigger it gets more advanced, and maybe in the future I'll add the potential to have multiple volumes. But at the moment that's what you get. So we can go through here, we can go into directories, we can come back out of directories again, and we can delete. We'll delete something. Why don't we delete something? Let's delete this backup copy, which I've there we are. Delete lw2.back. Yes, there we go. We can rename things as well. So this is all using CIO standard calls. So if we press the R key, we can rename that to lw3.exe or something. There we go. So yeah, you can do all that stuff. So we can load a text file if we want to. I think I've already got one here. This is a test file created with the last word on the Atari 8-bit. So if we change that to saved, let's have a look. So if we add at the end saved using FAT FMMS, there we go, and then we press Ctrl and S again. That's saved to the FAT partition, the FAT32, the 64GB FAT32 partition. Now we can clear that out of memory. No, and then we'll go back to the menu here and we'll load that file again. You can see it's got our changes that we made there. So straight away, hopefully you can see that any application that works with DOS 2.5, MyDOS, SpartaDOS, etc., it can write to the FAT partition, FAT16, FAT32, just as if you were using a standard DOS. Now the advantage here is that when you take this SD card out of the Atari and plug it into your PC or your laptop, that text file, test2.txt, there it is on the PC. And you can load it into a text editor or a hex editor or whatever you want to do with it, with no disk image in between the two. The only problem you're going to have with text files, of course, is that the Atari line feeds are completely incompatible with the PC, but there's a utility called RWTEST, which will get around that. You can drag your file into RWTEST and convert between the two. Obviously, when I get time, I'll add the option to actually use PC style carriage returns and line feeds in the last word or a similar text editor. Now if we come back out of here, so we're going to quit, and we should see the loader back again. So if you run a program directly from the loader and then you quit to DOS and jump through DOSVEC, you'll come back to the loader, but I might as well show you now. We have a command processor. This is essentially the disk utility package for that DOS that we've just been using to write to the card. And at the moment, this should be released, this beta, by the time you watch this video, but I'm going to change the naming conventions and that kind of thing. At the moment, it's called command.xex. So if you press return on this, this is what you get. You get FAT FMS version 0.1 by me. And this is command processor, as you can see. So if you're familiar with SpartaDOS, you should be able to find your way around here. You can consult the manual, of course, what I have wrote. So if we do dir plus s, what we should get here is a list of all the folders, the directories in the root directory. Now you can see if we do a shorter directory, let's say if we do dir.exe, there we go. So it all fits on one screen. So what you should be able to see here is that this directory listing is presented very much as per FAT DOS, MS-DOS on the PC. So you've got the volume name, serial number, the number of files that were listed, the cumulative size of everything that was listed on the screen, the number of directories that were listed on the screen, and the free space on the disk. Now if you're using FAT16, the first time you query the disk, you'll see a little pause because FAT16 does not keep track of the number of free clusters on the disk. So initially, when you first power up and interrogate that FAT16 volume, the DOS has got no idea how much free space is on the disk, so it has to establish it by reading the FAT from one end to another. Now fortunately the hardware is so fast here that it can do that even with the biggest possible FAT16 partition, it can go from end to end and count the free clusters in the space of no more than about 4 seconds. So the pause that you'll get at the end of the first dir command is relatively short, and thereafter, having established the amount of free space on the disk, it never has to do that again until the next time you cold boot into that partition, if you like. So we can run obviously our programs like we did from the loader, but we can run them from the command line, which we'll do now. So here we are, we're running the program from the command processor now. Okay, just as we did before, we can load that text file in. Now, if we quit to DOS now, we're going to go back not to the loader, but to the command processor, because this is where we started, you see. So, if we have a look again at the list of directory, I'll just give you a quick tour of what we can do here. I think I've got a folder called tbxl, so cd tbxl, so change the current directory, tbxl, there we go. So the current directory is now tbxl, we can do a directory in there. And we can run tbxl if we want to. So it's got a com extension, we don't need to type anything else, there you go. Turbo Basic XL, and Turbo Basic XL will allow you to do a dir command, and now the dir command looks exactly as it would with DOS2 and derivatives. So you can write your Turbo Basic program and then go back to DOS. There we go, press break instead, and there we go, we're back at the DOS prompt. So if let's make a new folder in here, mkdir program. So we should have a new directory called program, and that's date stamped and time stamped with the current date and time. So we cd into program, directory. So we've got the current folder and the parent folder entries, and they are date and time stamped again with the current time. If we want to copy something, so let's copy from the parent folder, we'll copy tbxl.com and we'll copy it to here. Okay, the copy command is very, very incomplete, I have to say, and you'll see that also in the documentation. The documentation for the copy command is very incomplete because the copy command is very incomplete, but it does allow things like recursive copying of whole directory trees and stuff like that. So we should now have, there we go, we've got a copy of tbxl.com, which I've just copied from the parent directory into here, and I'm going to run it just to make sure it worked. So we're now running the file I've just copied there, so that worked well. Very good. So let's cd back up the tree so we can use the parent directory shortcut like so. There we are, back in the tbxl directory. So hopefully you can get a feeling of what this might allow you to do. I think I've got, if we'll talk about performance, I think I've got read-write test. Yes, I've got read-write test here. So let's run that. Fairly respectable performance. Now this file management system can be told to impersonate SpartaDOS, so it'll actually present itself to programs like RWTEST as if it is SpartaDOS. That's a bit risky because of course I think RWCRC crashes if you tell the FMS to impersonate SpartaDOS, because it thinks it's running under SpartaDOS and calls kernel functions which don't exist. But RWTEST, if I enable SpartaDOS ID back in the loader before I run this DOS, it won't prompt you to go back to the back to DOS after it's completed, because it realizes it's running from a command line DOS. The reason it's prompting you for that key is because it thinks, oh well, as soon as it goes to DOS it's going to clear the screen and print the DOS menu. See? One of the problems with FAT32 in particular is allocating clusters. The FAT can be absolutely huge, the allocation table, just enormous. And Windows is supposed to maintain a hint in the boot parameter block, so to give them a hint as to where in the file allocation table they should start to look. Now Windows just does it writes the most unpredictable values there, so I've had to come up with some methodologies to try and sidestep being trapped in an endless search for free clusters with FAT32, and it seems to work well, and we get reasonably good performance. So you shouldn't be waiting around for ages and ages and ages for the file system to find a new cluster when you are copying files. So while we're looking at this FAT file system, why don't we have a look at the MEM.SAV feature quickly. So I'm going to go into OSS carts. I'm going to go down to Basic Excel 103 because I know that one works. Some of these are a little bit glitchy. There's a lot of OSS images floating around that aren't quite right for some reason, but anyway, this will be our first look at the context menu. So if we press Ctrl and M here, we've got a menu which should be very helpful. It means you don't have to remember a load of keystrokes and shortcuts. To access the options on the context menu, you can go up and down with the arrow keys. You can jump 10 items with Shift Control up and down. You can press the shortcut key listed there, apart from return of course, because that will select the currently highlighted selection, but everything else, if you actually for instance press Control and D, that'll take the highlight straight to the delete. In fact, we can do that there, so I press Control and D now, it goes there. We don't want to do this obviously. So anyway, go back into the menu and we'll mount the cartridge without rebooting. So if we selected open, it would mount the cartridge, reboot the system, but if we go into mount here, it'll mount the cartridge. Right, so if we now go back to the root directory and we will run the command processor. I think we need a more convenient way to run this as well, some explicit start DOS option, which I'll add. So we'll run the command processor. We won't unmount the cartridge. So here we are. Let's make ourselves a little folder, I think. BXL. Right. BXL. So we've got a folder there for our basic Excel programs. Now I'm going to run car, which is the cartridge, which we mounted earlier. There's basic Excel. And we can do a directory here. It's rather long, so we'll stop it. Actually, I'm going to go back to DOS for a minute. I'll CD into basic Excel. There we go. And now we'll go back into the cartridge. And I'm going to write a little program here. Hello world. And go to 10. And run that. And there we go. And save it. I don't know what the received wisdom is for file extensions for basic Excel, but there we go. So we should now see our program. And let's go to DOS again. There's our directory with the program we just saved. And let's go back into the cartridge. And let's list again. And there we go, the program's still there. So that's memory save, caching the user memory on the card and bringing it back when you go back into the application cartridge. So as I say, hopefully you can see the potential here. This DOS doesn't yet have any kind of batch file facilities, that kind of thing. As I say, it's written in 5 kilobytes of machine code. It's more or less a complete kind of subset of MS-DOS, if you like. It doesn't have FAT12 support, this version, for sheer terms of space. FAT12 isn't that difficult to implement, but it does bloat the file system a little bit. But we've got a help screen as well, I should also show you, which lists most of the commands that you've got here. So we've got dir, chdr, delete, rename, copy, unlock, time and date. So we can set the time and date of the command line, as you've probably seen with other DOS is we can run basic programs. You can add the file name of the basic program you want to run after basic, and it'll run that basic program. But it's all in the manual anyway. You can rename directories as well. The vol command just displays information about the actual fat volume there. So we can see again the volume name, serial number, cluster size, capacity, and free space. We've got 59 gigabytes of free space on this volume. But yeah, so this is very much a version 1 thing. It's, if I want to expand this, I'm going to have to make a decision as to whether I want to go under the shadow RAM, under the operating system, which is going to be unpopular with some people because it's going to break compatibility with software which uses the shadow RAM, or I can make the thing relocatable so it can run in the extended memory if it's available. I don't know. Or just leave it as it is. I don't know. It depends how much interest there is, what sort of take-up there is with the thing. So obviously I'm interested in hearing about any bugs in this file system, of course. So we'll look more closely at this if there's a demand for it later on, I suppose. I'll probably revisit it later on in this video anyway, but that gives you a rough idea. Oh, I'm already in DOS. Now if we type exit in the command processor, what we should see is back to the loader. So you can see when the command processor is being loaded, it's kind of it creates an extra level of hierarchy between the loader and the application. So when the command processor is running and you go through DOSFEC, it takes you back to the command processor. When the command processor isn't there, DOSFEC will take you back to the loader. And if the command processor is there, exit takes you back to the loader. If we have a little look at the menu system again, this is something I want to introduce to you because it's a kind of a gateway to a lot of the extra functionality. Now I've got a joystick here. Now the joystick control, I've put a fair bit of thought into that. I've changed it a little bit since prior versions, naturally because the loader itself has changed. So with the joystick you can move through the menu system, obviously, and you can go up and down the list, and it accelerates. Well, when you've got acceleration turned on in the options screen there, which I can show you with the joystick, accelerate. So accelerate is enabled, so that means after a certain number of repetitions, about 10 or so, with the same key held down, because all the joystick does as well as issue key. So this works with the keyboard as well. So if you hold down the same key and it repeats more than 10 times, the repeat delay reduces, so the key gets repeated faster until you let go of it, and that works with the joystick as well. Now, so what if you want to open the menu but you don't want to use the keyboard? Well, what we've got here, this needs careful explanation. Obviously if you press the fire button, that's equivalent to the return key, so we go into the folder or whatever we're doing and back out again. Now with the keyboard, to get the menu up, you press Ctrl and M. Again, if that's not a good shortcut, let me know. I'll listen to alternatives when the beta's out. It's all up for discussion, but Ctrl and M seems to make sense to me for menu. So, if you want to open the menu with the joystick, because you've got limited things you can do with the joystick, you've only got one button. If we press the button down, now if we were to release the button now, it would open that directory. But I'm going to move the joystick to the right with the button held down and then let it come back to the beginning, and then I'm going to release the button. So there's the context menu, and I want to go back out again. I just hold the button down and go to the left. In point of fact, moving left or right with the keyboard or the joystick will actually clear the context menu, whether you've got the button held down or not. But it's just to demonstrate that with the joystick, button down to the right opens the context menu, and button down to the left in any context basically issues an escape key, which gets you out of the menu. So if we open the menu here, and the context menu tailors its contents, so any options that aren't appropriate to the highlighted item, or items, because we can select a set of items as well, will not be present. So in this particular case, you can select items. Now you can see those Windows-like shortcuts there. We've got Ctrl-C to copy, Ctrl-X to cut, and Ctrl-V to paste. When there's too many items to fit all on the menu at once, it scrolls up and down, and you can see the arrows that indicate there's more information at either end of the list. So you can see you've got quite a lot of stuff here, and there's that restart option that we've also got in the exit menu. So we can select items, deselect items, we can cut, copy and paste files and folders in fact as well. Delete things, we can rename things, we can set the properties of files and folders, we can get info about whatever's highlighted or selected, we can select the sort order of the list, we can create a new folder, we can create a new disk image, we can add a favourite, so of most frequently used items, if you want to add them to a list of favourites, you can do that. You can open the favourites menu itself, which is where your favourites are stored. You can open the history folder. Now this loader will optionally, it's off by default, you know, no big brother stuff here, but if you want the loader to record every item that you've run, the most recent 100 I think it is, in a special folder with a list of shortcuts pointing to those items, you can do that. And when you want to have a look, if you've run a game and you couldn't remember where it was or what it was called, but you knew you ran it the other day, go into the history folder and you'll be able to find it in there. We can auto run items as well, so when you first boot the computer, when you first power it on, you can tell it to run an executable file or mount disk images, etc. And that'll completely bypass the loader entirely, you won't even see it. So for all the world, it just looks like the machine is booted normally, but with the selected media already mounted. And again, we've got a special auto run folder that you can go into. So you can see we've got 3 special folders here: the favorites folder, the history folder, and the auto run folder. And finally at the bottom there we've got restart. So if we have a look at, just pick something at random here, because it's going to take forever to go through everything. So if we click on the get info function with the fire button there, or the return key, you can see the output here. Because we were on the TBXL folder, we've got the size of all the contents of that folder, and it's got 4 files in it, 1 folder in it, and it tells you when the folder was created, and the attributes are, well, missing because we can't really report all the different attributes in multiple items. So that's how that appears at the moment, as if they're all off. Then we'll verify that. We'll go in here. So again, if we go into our basic Excel folder that we made earlier, and we select get info, we can see that we've got that program that we saved, and there's no further folders in that tree, and we can see that we created the folder today on the 1st of July 2022. So probably worth pointing out, if it's not already apparent, that when we went into that DOS, our command processor, and we did a dir on this root directory, we only see short file names in DOS, but in the loader we see the long file names. So these long file names here, A-2, what you'll see in DOS, when you list this same directory, you'll still be able to get at this file, but you'll access it via the short alias, the 8 character file name and the 3 character extender. So you'll see the alias of this file in DOS. So anyway, if we call up the information on a much bigger folder tree here, if we do get info there, now this is going to take a little while to scan through this whole directory tree because it's got quite a lot of stuff in it, but by the time it's finished, it'll report and give you information about the contents of that branch of the directory tree. So we'll wait for it to do that, just being an 8-bit machine. And again, I think this being a beta, the performance is reasonably good, but I think there's probably improvements that we could make, aggressive optimizations to the directory tree scanner and that kind of stuff. So the intention with a lot of this new stuff was to just get it to the point where it basically works now, and once it works and it hasn't got horrendous bugs in it, then we can go away and optimize it a little bit more. So there we are. Finally, we've got the information on the VBXE demos tree. We've got the total size of the contents of this part of the directory tree is over 9 megabytes, 618 files, 88 folders, and the date and time when the folder was created. Let's do some little file management tasks, I think. So let's go into our TBXL folder, where we've got a few things there. So let's go back up here. So let's go into the menu again. I quite enjoy using the joystick to control this. So let's copy that whole folder, I think. So we just press copy and it's going to scan through that folder. And there we go. So that's now on the clipboard, if you like. So I think I've got some test folders here. Yeah, we can, we'll delete this actually. So we'll delete this file because we don't want it anymore. There we go, that file's gone. And into this folder, I'm going to open the menu again. So you can see the menu is much shorter now because there isn't a great deal. Oh, shit. So this folder's empty now. So if I want to paste the files that I just cut, I can actually, what I'll do this time is I'll just call Control and V. And here we are, it's pasting those files that I just copied to the clipboard from the other folder, and it's copied the entire subtree. So if we go into our TBXL here, we can see that all the contents of that TBXL folder, including the program folder and the file that was inside of it, have been copied across to here. So let's copy something a little bit more, let's copy something a little bit bigger. Let's copy Candle's branch of the VBXE demos folder. But we'll take this opportunity to actually show you file tagging and selection. So I'm going to go into this folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the menu and I'm going to go select item. So you can see what happens here all of a sudden is we've got a check mark over on the right hand side of the screen. And that denotes that that is selected, so we can select multiple items just by pressing Control and space. So let's select all 4 of those folders. Now, if we go into the menu, I'm jumping between the keyboard and the joystick here, and we go copy, it's going to copy all 4 of those folders onto the clipboard. So there we go, so that's done. So let's go back up to where we were before in our test folder. Okay. We'll use the same folder and we'll press Ctrl and V again. Now we've got a lot more data this time. We have got 2 megabytes of data, so it's going to take a little bit longer. But what we get, so this gives us a chance because it's going to take a while to show you what's going on with this copy dialog. So we're copying file 1920 of 119 items. It shows you the path of the current item, the relative path, so that's relative to either the source folder or the destination folder, both the same. The amount of data we've copied as a proportion of the total amount of data, a rough estimate of how much data per second we're copying, which is a bit jumpy at the moment. It needs a little bit more finessing because of the way it's worked out, but it's quite useful. And an estimation of how much time is remaining on this copy operation, and we can press escape to abort at any time. You can press if you don't get a prompt to explicitly say that you can press escape to get out of something, and it's a file operation, break key will get you out of it as well. But you see, well, a quarter of the way there already. So let's let this paste operation finish, and then we'll have a look at what we've actually ended up with in this folder. Okay, so that's finished, and as you can see, we've got all of those folders that we selected in the VBXE demos folder, and they've all been faithfully copied across with all their subfolders into the new location. So you've got, as you can see, very Windows-like file management cut, copy and paste facilities. Obviously cut works in the same way rather than copy, but when you paste the cut items, it actually deletes the original. Now the file system manager in the loader itself, it's built, the rename function actually has the capability to move an item from one directory branch to another without copying any data at all, but I haven't implemented that yet because I just didn't want it to get too complicated before it was tested out in the open. But eventually, when you move an item, so cut the item and paste it to the same volume, it won't copy all the data. It'll simply move the directory entries from the source folder to the destination folder. It's also possible, if you've got more than one FAT partition, to perform these copy operations from one FAT partition to another, even if they're different FAT types. So you could copy something from a FAT32 partition and paste it into a FAT16 partition. But that's definitely not well tested. That requires a switch between the context of one FAT partition and another when you're reading from the source and writing to the destination. It's basically implemented, but it's not well tested, so by all means try it, but on a test volume, because that definitely needs more work and more testing. So yeah, so we've got a lot of file management capabilities here. If we stick with this folder, we'll show you a couple of the other things we can do here. We'll go back into the menu. So we've done cut, copy, paste, we've done selection, so you can select all the items in a folder if you want to. You can deselect all the items in the folder, and as you can see, you get an extra column to save space. That selection column only appears when it's actually needed. So we go back, we'll deselect all, go back into the menu, so we can rename something. So let's go and let's see now. Let's rename our programs folder. So let's rename that. Now this renaming supports long file names, so we can call it, if we want to, we can call it Turbo Basic XL Programs. And there we go, so that folder is now called Turbo Basic XL Programs. We can set the properties, so at the moment that's compiler.com's got the archive flag set. You can toggle the other file attributes on and off, and we'll just come out of that without changing anything. Sort order, yes. We'll demonstrate that with a bigger folder that's got more stuff in it. We can create a new folder here, so let's call this one TBXL test folder. Okay, so that's a new folder ready for use. Now if we can add a favorite, so let's say that we want to run the Turbo Basic XL interpreter quite frequently, and we want to be able to get it. We don't want to move it, but we want to shortcut to this file where somewhere we can find it. So let's select add favorite. Right, so we've got a list of options here. We can add a favorite, and that'll put the shortcut in the favorites folder, which you can call up anytime you want, but you can also set up to 10 shortcut keys. So I'll add a favorite, just a standard favorite to start with. Shortcut created. So if we now go into open favorites, there we've got our favorites. And as you can see, I've already added some things to the favorites folder. We've got Atari Writer, command processor, the last word, and now there's our TBXL shortcut. And you can see it's a shortcut that points to something else because it's got a curly arrow next to it, and we can do all the same file operations on shortcut files that we can do on other things. So we've got the information that will tell you that the shortcut file is 16 bytes long. We can also show the target of the shortcut. So obviously the shortcut points to the tbxl.com file, but where is it? I can't remember where it is because I've got a bad memory. So let's select this, and it's opened the target folder with the file highlighted. So that's the target file to which we just created a shortcut. Now let's say let's go into the command processor and let's make a shortcut for this one, but I want to put the command processor on a hotkey. Now these hotkey shortcuts, if you make one of these, that'll be on Shift, Control and the number. So I want Shift, Control and 1 to start the command processor. So we're going to select that one, and it says shortcut created. So let's have a look in the favorites folder. And you can see we've got another shortcut to command.xex. Now, so let's go back to the root directory, or anywhere we want. Go back in here for the sake of argument. So we're not even in the root directory. So let's press now Shift, Control, and the number 1. It's asking us if we want to unmount the cart. No, I don't on this particular occasion. And there we go. There is our command processor. And it's worth mentioning also that we can select files with the joystick. So if we hold the trigger down and pull the joystick on the down axis, it will select the files, and if we do the same thing again, it toggles them, so that removes the selection. So anyway, if we go into the favorites folder, we can of course run anything in the normal fashion. So I can run the last word, for example, or TBXL. We can run this via the shortcut just by pressing the trigger on it. Let's unmount that cartridge now, because I think we're finished with it. So you don't need to put all of the files that you want to use frequently in the same folder. You can leave them in their original location and simply make a shortcut to them. So just to prove that we've got complete media compatibility between the Atari and the PC here, if we go to the folder that I made when we were logged into DOS there, and there's our test.bxl file that I saved. So just by taking this SD card out of the SIDE3 and plugging it into your card reader on the PC, you've got access to all the files. So there's the file that I renamed as well in the loader. I changed it to Turbo Basic XL Programs, and I copied the interpreter into it. So you can freely transfer information back and forth from and to the Atari with no disk images, and this will work on Mac and of course Linux as well. Anything that understands FAT16 and FAT32. And with that, I think this video is in danger of getting a little bit long, so I'm going to split this introduction to the SIDE3 loader up into 2 parts. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody for watching, and I want to thank the people especially who support the channel, and you can see their names up on the screen right now. A very sincere thank you to all of them, and thank you to you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, please consider leaving a like underneath. I will basically head off right now and start work on part 2. So thanks again, and I will see you in the next video. So bye bye for now.